Thank you for today. I'll let you know once we've decided the wedding date. Today was a special day. My son Bob came over to announce his engagement. Bob and my husband Henry had already stepped outside, so I was about to follow them. That's when Bob's fiancée, Michelle, placed her hand on my shoulder, leaned in close, and said, "Sorry, but you won't have a seat at our wedding." What? I couldn't grasp the meaning behind Michelle's words. Well, you're not really Bob's blood relative, right? So, you're basically a stranger. It'd be embarrassing if you came. Michelle whispered this in my ear and then slightly pushed me away. Taken aback, I couldn't react in time and fell down. As I sat there, stunned and speechless, Michelle looked down at me with cold eyes. That look struck an indescribable fear in me. The word housekeeper, which she had once hurled at me when she visited our home, flashed through my mind. It wasn't a misunderstanding after all. I was at a loss for how to respond to Michelle's malice. I see. Trying to contain my humiliation, I murmured. Right. A housekeeper should live just like that. I had no choice but to accept Michelle's demand not to attend the wedding. But on the day of the wedding. What do you think you're doing? Don't mess with me. Michelle would come to regret her words to me. I am Sally. After graduating from college, I started working at a company. Just an ordinary office worker, but I had a hobby of drawing illustrations. Initially, I began drawing casually, but as it turned out, people liked my work, so I continued. And it was through these illustrations that I met Henry. He resonated with my art. As we grew closer, I began to consider marrying him. However, we were both hesitant to express these feelings. The reason was Henry's past. He was divorced and had a son, Bob, from his previous marriage. That fact puts a brake on our emotions. But Henry opened up to me. He told me about his divorce due to his first wife's infidelity and his intention to raise Bob alone. But then he fell in love with me. After revealing everything, Henry proposed to me. Moved by his sincerity, I accepted his proposal. However, Bob was initially wary of me. I decided to take things slow until he could accept me. My efforts paid off, and Bob eventually warmed up to me, leading to my marriage with Henry. The three of us then began our life together. It was tough balancing work and family, but with Henry's help in household chores, I was able to keep my job and continue drawing. Time flies. Before I knew it, 20 years had passed since our marriage. Bob graduated from college and left home for work. Henry and I felt a mix of pride and loneliness. With more time on my hands, I devoted myself more to my illustration hobby. Then one day, Bob called. "It's been a while. Are you free now?" "Oh, Bob. What's up? Are you doing okay? How's work?" I was delighted to hear from him after so long. "Nothing much. I'm coming home this weekend." Bob's tone was curt. I felt something was off but thought he must be tired from work. "Oh? I should prepare a meal. Anything you'd like to eat?" "Just hand the phone to Dad." Bob sounded a bit irritated, as if he didn't want to talk to me. Though hurt, I passed the phone to Henry. "Bob wants to talk to you." Henry took the call and started chatting with Bob, laughing loudly. Watching them, I felt a sense of alienation. After a short conversation, Henry hung up and turned to me with a smile. "Bob's bringing his girlfriend home." "His girlfriend?" I was surprised and exclaimed loudly. "Yeah. Seems like he's thinking about marriage." Henry continued, looking happy. Yet, I couldn't shake off a feeling of gloom. Bob's behavior somehow nagged at me. Henry noticed something was off and looked at me with concern. "What's wrong? You seem down. Is something bothering you?" "No, it's just, I felt like Bob was a bit cold towards me." I tried to sound cheerful, not wanting to worry Henry. Henry sighed after hearing this. "Well, it can't be helped. He must have been embarrassed to tell you about bringing his girlfriend home. That's gotta be it." "I hope so." I agreed with Henry, not wanting to think about anything else. But the unease that had started to spread in my mind only grew with each passing day. And finally, the day arrived. I was restless all morning, cleaning the house and getting myself ready. Henry was also unusually unsettled. As we were in this state, the doorbell rang. We hurried to the front door and welcomed Bob and his fiancé inside. Bob had matured quite a bit since I last saw him. But my attention was drawn to the woman standing beside him. She was a beautiful woman with short hair and distinctive facial features. Stunning enough to be a celebrity. I was momentarily overwhelmed by her presence. "This is Michelle, my fiancé." "Hello. I'm Michelle, Bob's fiancé," she said, giving a smile. Then she looked at me and gave a sly smile. "Hey, Bob, this is..." "Yeah. She's the housekeeper I told you about." I was shocked at Bob's words. But just then, a truck passed by the house, and I couldn't hear him clearly. I looked at Henry, feeling anxious, and he seemed puzzled too. It seemed like he had heard something. Before I could clarify, Bob and Michelle had already headed to the living room. I reluctantly followed them to the living room and asked them to sit on the sofa. While preparing coffee and snacks in the kitchen, I mulled over Bob's words. He definitely called me a housekeeper. But that couldn't be true. After all, I raised Bob for 20 years. We might not be related by blood. But I gave him my love and care. It had to be a misunderstanding. I tried to convince myself, but the doubt lingered, especially after the recent phone call. However, I didn't want to confront him and create a hostile atmosphere, so I deliberately avoided the topic. I brought the tea and snacks to the living room, pretending to be calm. We then chatted about various things. Bob and Michelle met at work and started dating. To my surprise, Michelle was the daughter of a well-known toy company's president. I had met her once at work. When I mentioned this to Michelle, she responded indifferently. But apart from that, the conversation was lively and enjoyable. Then the topic shifted to their wedding. "A wedding, huh? Must be a grand affair." "Yes, indeed. My father is really excited about it." "I bet." "Michelle, you're so beautiful, you'll look stunning in a wedding dress." Instead of responding, Michelle just turned to me and smirked. Seeing her twisted smile, I felt an indescribable discomfort. She was looking down on me. I realized that instantly. But Henry seemed genuinely happy. I forced a smile, not wanting to ruin the moment. All I wanted was to keep the peace. About an hour later, they said they were leaving. "Thank you for today. We'll let you know when we've decided the wedding date." We talked about this as we headed to the front door. Michelle went to the bathroom, so Bob and Henry went outside first. As I was about to go out, Michelle came out of the bathroom and approached me. She put her hand on my shoulder and leaned in close. "Sorry, but you won't have a seat at our wedding." "What? What do you mean?" I didn't understand Michelle's intention. "Because you're not really Bob's blood relative, right? So, you're practically a stranger. It'd be embarrassing if you came." Michelle whispered this and then lightly pushed me away. I was so taken aback that I fell down. Michelle looked down at me with cold eyes as I sat there, stunned and speechless. I felt an indescribable fear when I saw her eyes. As someone who's never been confrontational, I didn't know how to respond to Michelle's malice. "I see," I muttered quietly, struggling to contain my humiliation. "That's right. A housekeeper should live just like that," Michelle said with a triumphant laugh and left. I couldn't move for a while, feeling as heavy as lead, and on the verge of breaking down in tears. But I knew everyone was waiting outside. I couldn't keep them waiting. Dragging myself, I made my way to the door. Henry came in as the door opened. "Bob and Michelle have already left. But I'm surprised, Bob dating a girl like her," Henry said, laughing loudly. But I couldn't share his mood. The thought of what might happen to me after their marriage made me feel sick. "Yes, it's really great," I managed to reply, turning my face away from Henry. Sally? What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Henry looked at me, puzzled. I quickly made up an excuse. Yes, I guess I'm just a little tired from all the tension this morning. That's understandable. No point in staying here. Let's go to the living room. I'll give you a shoulder rub, Henry said, gently guiding me to the living room. Touched by Henry's kindness, I finally broke down in tears. My crying didn't just stop, it became more intense. I collapsed at the entrance to the living room and sobbed uncontrollably. Hey, Sally. What happened? Henry was bewildered, pacing around me. But he seemed to understand that this wasn't tears of joy. It's okay to cry now, you know. Nobody's watching. It's okay. It's okay, Henry said, gently patting my back. After a while, when I had calmed down, I told Henry everything. How Michelle acted condescendingly. And told me not to come to the wedding because I was a stranger. Henry listened in silence. When I finished, he crossed his arms, deep in thought. So, that's it. I thought I heard Bob calling you a housekeeper, but I dismissed it as a misunderstanding. Henry sighed heavily. I'm really sorry I didn't notice. It's not your fault. And there's no reason for anyone to call me a housekeeper. That's what bothers me. Bob wouldn't say something like that. Sally, you've been a great mother to him. Something's definitely off. Thank you. Just hearing you say that means a lot to me. Henry stood by my side. And that alone lightened my heart. Anyway, there's no use thinking about it here. Let's visit Bob on our next day off and ask what he means. But will he even agree to meet us? We can use the wedding as an excuse or anything. I'll contact him, Sally, don't worry. 2 weeks later, we took the opportunity when Michelle was out to visit Bob's house. Welcome. Didn't expect you to actually come. Could have just called. Bob seemed slightly displeased. Still, he let us in. Once inside, Henry immediately confronted Bob. We're here because, when you were at our house, you called Sally a housekeeper. What did you mean by that? What, that's it? Bob replied, sounding annoyed. What do you mean that's it? That's terrible, no matter how you look at it. I was angered by Bob's callous attitude. That's right. Sally's been like a mother to you. She may not be related by blood, but she's undoubtedly family. So what? I can say whatever I want. What's it to you? Ruining my day off. It's not okay. I'm telling you it's wrong to treat your mother like that. Bob glared at me fiercely upon hearing my words. Shut up. You're just a housekeeper. Just be quiet and listen to what I say. Henry and Bob started arguing intensely following those words. However, I remained surprisingly calm. Something about Bob's behavior was off. He had never called me a housekeeper in all our years together. It seemed like Michelle must have influenced him. Bob, did Michelle say something to you? That's right. I turned around in shock to find Michelle standing there. She had been in the house all along. But I'm not to blame. You brainwashed Bob. Michelle shouted at me, pointing her finger. What are you talking about? That's not true. I retorted, recalling everything I had done for Bob. I raised him. And there was no reason for Michelle to accuse me of brainwashing. But Michelle continued her assault. But you also spent time drawing illustrations, didn't you? Isn't that odd? Normally, there's no time for such things when raising a child. That's because I helped with the housework. There's nothing wrong with that. Henry defended me. No, now that I think about it, it's weird. You say you're his mother, but you never really looked after me. I felt like my head was going to explode. Hearing such things from Bob was almost too much to bear. Anyway, you have no blood relation or love for him. Just having someone like you in the family makes me sick. Michelle sneered with a twisted face. If you hate it so much, then don't marry him. But I love Bob. Honestly, I don't need poor people like you. I'm just greeting you formally for appearances. Henry slammed his hand on the table upon hearing this. Enough! How much more do you need to insult us? Bob, don't marry this woman. However, Bob remained cool. Dad, you still don't get it. You don't have a say in this. Understand? That's right. Listen, my father has connections in various industries. If you try to break off the marriage, I can ruin you socially. Got it? Michelle smirked, just like before. So, just obey us. Then maybe you'll get some scraps. That should be enough for poor people. That's how it is. Now leave. We left, feeling an indescribable humiliation. I could hear Henry grinding his teeth. One last thing, Bob. Do you really want to marry her? Of course. After a moment of silence, he suddenly stood up. Fine, do what you want. Sally, let's go. Henry left without waiting for my reply. I followed without a word. Michelle and Bob's laughter stabbed me in the back as I left. We didn't speak on the way home. That night, Henry apologized to me. I'm really sorry. This is all my fault. Henry repeatedly apologized to me. Don't be silly. It's not your fault. No need to apologize. I've been thinking. I should have faced Bob properly when we got divorced. Henry looked pained. But I didn't have the capacity back then. I must have made him suffer without knowing. But there's no point in saying that now. Maybe, but I can't stand him calling you a housekeeper. I confided my feelings about Michelle. I can't forgive what Michelle said. But Bob wants to marry her. I respect that. Henry nodded in agreement. Me too. Maybe we haven't really expressed our true feelings to each other. Is there anything we can do? I'll try to convince him. We can't let this continue. Henry then made efforts to change Bob's mind whenever he could. But as long as Michelle was there, it was futile resistance. I became so distressed that I even called a close relative for advice. But nothing was resolved, and the day before the wedding arrived. Naturally, my name wasn't on the guest list. Sally, I'm sorry. I wasn't strong enough. It's okay. It's what Bob wants, no matter the form. I'll watch over him from afar, even if they call me a housekeeper. I was sincere. This was my role in life. Henry held my hand with teary eyes. Having him by my side was enough. I genuinely felt that way. On the day of the wedding, I drove Henry to the venue. He looked sorry until the end, but got out and headed to the ceremony. I decided to stay nearby, at least. So, I parked my car in a parking lot not too far from the venue and turned off the engine. Inside the quiet car, I reflected on the time I spent living with Bob. Regardless of what Bob says, that time is irreplaceable to me. I wondered how he was doing now. Perhaps the ceremony had already started. I closed my eyes, imagining the scene at the venue. Suddenly, my phone rang in the quiet car. I looked and saw it was Henry. Surprised, I answered the call. What's going on? Something is wrong. Henry sounded panicked. In the background, I could hear a commotion. What do you mean something's wrong? As I asked, Henry began explaining the situation at the venue. When Henry arrived at the wedding venue, there were few people around. But no more guests appeared as time passed. Then Josh, Michelle's father, approached Henry, wondering why the guests hadn't arrived. Bob and Michelle also hurriedly asked Henry for an explanation. But I don't know anything. Sally, do you know anything? I could faintly hear Michelle's voice in the background, seemingly asking to put the phone on speaker mode. Suddenly, the noisy voices came through the phone. I talked about Michelle to our relatives. Everyone listened intently. What do you mean? What did you explain? Everything. So, maybe all the relatives thought you were a stranger and decided not to attend. Don't play dumb. Michelle sounded furious over the phone. Then Josh intervened. Michelle, what is this all about? Isn't Bob's mother not here? Who's talking right now? Both fell silent. I'm Bob's mother. It seems Michelle thinks I'm a stranger. My words enraged Michelle. Don't get cocky, you housekeeper. You poor person. After her outburst, she gasped. Michelle, what did you just say? Josh's roar was so loud it almost broke my phone. He began lecturing Michelle right there. It became clear I was nearby from Henry's explanation. Sally, I'm sorry. Could you come here? It's too much to ask over the phone. Okay, I'll be right there. I started the car and headed towards the venue. On the way, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. Arriving at the venue, I saw a sparse crowd of guests watching the commotion from a distance. I made my way through to the group. Josh was still angry. Michelle, in a beautiful dress, was crying, while Henry and Bob looked helpless. Josh shook my hand when he noticed me. You must be Sally. I'm Josh. I'm terribly sorry for my daughter's behavior. It's okay. I can't. I wasn't informed about you. I believed everything Michelle said and didn't even greet you. Josh seemed genuinely remorseful. He apologized to both Henry and me. And we accepted his apology. Could we pretend this never happened? Are you suggesting calling off the engagement? Yes. I can't let them continue after such disrespect. Josh, your sentiment is appreciated, but it's not our decision. It's up to them. Right. Michelle, did you hear that? The engagement is off. But Michelle and Bob wouldn't accept it easily. They argued with Josh, who fought back. Henry joined in, unusually angry. It must have been really bothering him since the other day. I couldn't intervene or even wanted to. During the argument, it became clear why Michelle looked down on me. She found out I drew illustrations, just like her, and felt jealous knowing I was more popular. Being pampered as a CEO's daughter, she couldn't stand not getting her way. She used Bob's past to brainwash him into thinking I was the villain. Michelle's outburst during the argument made Henry and Josh even more agitated. Bob desperately tried to salvage the situation. Please, don't make a mess of this. Shut up. Enough is enough. What will happen to me if I can't marry? I can't focus on work without a housekeeper like Dad. Wait, you're calling me the housekeeper? Michelle furiously confronted Bob, who looked like he regretted his words. I found the situation so absurd that I burst out laughing. What are you laughing at? Michelle snapped, advancing on me and grabbing my collar. A staff member, seeing this, intervened. I'm sorry, but please stop this commotion here. It's affecting the reputation of our venue. We came back to our senses at those words, and the wedding was promptly called off. We apologized to the guests for wasting their time and for the cancellation. Surprisingly, everyone seemed amused by the spectacle and no one was angry. Amidst the hostile atmosphere, the gathering dispersed. Later, Henry, Josh, and I met again to apologize for our children's misconduct. I'm truly sorry. Since he didn't have a mother, I may have spoiled him to compensate. I should have faced him more when we divorced. As for the wedding costs, I will cover them all. That's not right. We share the responsibility. Let's split the costs. All right, I understand. You are honorable people. Thank you. And Sally, is this your illustration? Josh showed me a drawing. It's definitely something I drew. Yes, that's mine. I've been interested in your work for some time. Really? Thank you. I replied, genuinely surprised. So, I'd like to use it in our company, if that's okay with you? I'd be honored. I replied, though a bit hesitant, wondering if this was some sort of atonement. Josh seemed to read my mind and smiled. This is strictly business, not atonement for what happened. After hearing that, I finally felt convinced. It was an offer from the leading company in the industry. There was no reason to refuse. Thank you very much. Please go ahead. That's great, isn't it? It's really good that you kept at it, Henry said with a kind smile. Henry paid the wedding expenses up front, which Bob would repay in installments. Freed from Michelle's influence, Bob gradually came to his senses and sincerely apologized to me. Michelle, apparently, quit her job after the wedding fiasco was witnessed by friends and colleagues. For someone with high pride like her, becoming a laughingstock was unbearable. Josh also seemed to be having a tough time with her, but that was their family's issue. My illustration gained more attention than expected and was successfully commercialized by Josh's company. It became so popular that it was constantly sold out. With numerous illustration requests coming in, I decided to quit my job and focus solely on my art. Henry fully supported this decision. It's amazing how things work out. What once seemed like a disaster turned out well in the end. Now, I'm just enjoying my days drawing illustrations and living with Henry.